7 German fighters circle above. A lone Tempest limps through the sky, engine screaming, wings shuddering from cannon fire. The pilot expects the kill shot any second, but he does something that breaks every rule in the manual. He rolls inverted, drops the nose straight down, and plunges toward the earth in a vertical dive that should tear the aircraft apart. The enemy fighters hesitate, confused, their formation breaking as they watch him fall. What happened next would be studied in flight schools for decades. The Rhine Valley, January 1945. The sky over Germany is not romantic. It smells of cordite and burning oil. The cold at 15,000 feet turns the cockpit into a freezer. Radio chatter crackles with static and desperation. Below, the Rhine River cuts through devastated landscape, gray water reflecting gray clouds. This is the endgame of the air war. The Luftwaffe is bleeding out, but its remaining pilots are veterans, fanatics, or both. They fly the FW-190D, the long-nosed Dora, faster and deadlier than anything that came before. Allied bomber streams still bleed aircraft daily. Fighter escorts still lose planes they cannot afford to replace. The math is simple and brutal. Every mission costs machines and men. Into this grinder flies a pilot named Roland Beamont. He does not look like a killer. Tall, lean, with a face that belongs in a university lecture hall rather than a cockpit. A former test pilot with Hawker aircraft, he speaks in measured sentences, each word calibrated like an engineering specification. His squadron mates call him Rolly. Some call him the Professor. Beamont reads obsessively. While others drink or play cards, he sits in the dispersal hut with technical manuals, performance charts, and captured German tactical documents. He sketches diagrams in notebooks. He calculates load factors and G-tolerances. He asks questions that irritate his commanding officers. Questions like, why do we always fight climbing battles when the enemy has altitude advantage? What if we stopped trying to outclimb them? What if we went down instead of up? He does not fit the mold. Fighter pilots are supposed to be aggressive, instinctive, fearless. Beamont is none of these. He calculates, he questions, he second-guesses. This makes him dangerous in the eyes of the brass, not to the enemy but to himself. They tolerate him because he has test pilot credentials, because his technical knowledge is useful, because he keeps coming back. But they do not trust his instincts. They certainly do not trust his theories. Beamont has been developing one theory in particular, something he has not yet voiced to anyone. Something about negative G maneuvers and structural limits. Something about using gravity as a weapon instead of an enemy. He has sketched it dozens of times, run the numbers in his head during long patrols, visualized the execution while lying awake at night. He knows it violates doctrine. He knows it sounds insane. He also knows that on January 12, 1945, when 7 FW-190Ds bounce his flight over the Rhine, he will have no choice but to prove it works or die trying. The winter of 1945 carved deep into the bones of every airman stationed in Belgium. Ice formed on canopy glass. Breath-fogged oxygen masks even at ground level. Below, the patchwork of liberated Europe stretched toward the Rhine, and beyond it, the dying Reich fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. This was the final push. The combined bomber offensive had gutted German industry, but the Luftwaffe still had teeth. They husbanded their remaining aircraft, their dwindling fuel reserves, and struck when Allied formations were most vulnerable. The FW-190D became their primary weapon. Faster than the earlier Anton variants, it climbed like a rocket and dove like a stone. At altitude, it outperformed almost every Allied fighter except the latest Mustangs and Tempests, and even then, the margin was thin. The Hawker Tempest was a brute, a massive radial engine, thick wings, a frame built for low-altitude speed and punishment. It excelled at ground attack, at chasing V-1 buzz bombs, at turning inside enemy fighters in horizontal combat. But above 12,000 feet, the air thinned and the Tempest struggled. The FW-190D thrived there. German tactics exploited this ruthlessly. They climbed high, positioned themselves above Allied formations, and dove in slashing attacks. The closing speed gave pilots seconds to react. By the time a Tempest pilot spotted the threat, cannon shells were already chewing through his tail. Doctrine was clear. Maintain formation, climb if possible, use teamwork to cover each other, never dive away. Diving bled altitude, your only safety margin. Diving isolated you from your wingman. Diving was surrender. The statistics told a grim story. In December 1944, Tempest squadrons operating over the Rhine reported loss rates exceeding 15% per month. Pilots lasted an average of 20 missions before being killed, captured, or invalided out with wounds. Replacements arrived weekly, fresh from training schools in England, their logbooks thick with hours but empty of wisdom. Some lasted 3 sorties, some lasted 1. The veterans stopped learning names. They stopped attending funerals. There were too many. Ground crews worked through frozen nights, patching bullet holes, replacing shattered canopies, scrubbing blood from cockpits with gasoline and rags. They did not speak of what they cleaned. Mechanics developed rituals. Some painted small symbols on engine cowlings. Others refused to service aircraft that had lost 2 pilots. Everyone knew the numbers. Everyone pretended they did not. In briefing rooms, intelligence officers spread maps and pointed to zones of heaviest enemy activity: the Rhine crossings, the Ruhr industrial targets, the rail yards at Cologne, commanders requested. Better aircraft, more fuel, longer training cycles. The replies were sympathetic but vague. Resources flowed to strategic priorities. The tactical air war ground on. Pilots made do with what they had. And some pilots, the ones who could not stop thinking, who sketched diagrams instead of writing letters home, began to ask whether doctrine itself was the problem, whether the rules designed to keep them alive were actually getting them killed, whether survival required not following orders, but breaking them. Roland Beamont was born in 1920 in Chichester, England. His father was a banker. His mother played violin and read engineering journals for pleasure. The house smelled of wood polish and pipe smoke. Dinner conversations revolved around mathematics, mechanical problems, and the physics of flight. Roland learned early that precision mattered more than passion. He attended Eastbourne College, excelled in sciences, built model aircraft with obsessive attention to aerodynamic theory. Teachers described him as brilliant but distant. Classmates described him as strange. He did not play rugby. He did not chase girls. He sat in the library sketching wing profiles and calculating lift coefficients. At 18, he joined the Royal Air Force not out of patriotic fervor, but because flying was the most interesting engineering problem he could imagine. Flight training revealed something unexpected. Beamont was not a natural pilot. He was too analytical, too cautious, too prone to overthinking. Instructors noted his technical knowledge was exceptional, but his instincts were weak. One evaluation read, hesitant in simulated combat, over-reliant on instruments. Another flagged him as unsuitable for fighter duty. He was assigned to bombers, then transferred to experimental testing when his engineering background came to light. He flew prototype aircraft for Hawker, testing modifications, pushing performance envelopes, documenting failures. It was methodical work. It suited him. When war broke out, he returned to operational flying, bouncing between squadrons, never quite fitting in. He was competent but odd, reliable but unsettling. Pilots did not know what to make of a man who treated combat like a laboratory experiment. By 1944, Beamont had accumulated over 800 flight hours. He had flown hurricanes, typhoons, and now tempests. He had 3 confirmed kills, not through aggression, but through patience. He would wait for mistakes, exploit errors, fire only when geometry guaranteed a hit. His gunnery scores were average, his survival rate was exceptional. He studied the enemy obsessively. He read translated Luftwaffe training manuals. He analyzed gun camera footage frame by frame. He interviewed bomber crews about German tactics. He built a mental database of how the enemy thought, how they positioned, how they attacked. He noticed patterns. He saw gaps. He began to believe that Allied doctrine was fighting the last war, not this one. His squadron mates tolerated him. Some appreciated his technical insights. Others found him exhausting. He would interrupt briefings with questions about wing loading and stall characteristics. He would sketch attack angles on scraps of paper, explaining why certain maneuvers were suboptimal. His commanding officer, Squadron Leader McConnell, a barrel-chested Scotsman with 2 tours and a distinguished flying cross, once told him bluntly that combat was not a math problem. Beamont replied that everything was a math problem if you looked hard enough. McConnell did not find that reassuring, but Beamont kept flying, kept thinking, kept filling notebooks with calculations that no one else read. And in those notebooks, buried among performance charts and tactical diagrams, was a sketch of an aircraft in an inverted vertical dive. Beneath it, a single annotation, -G escape, untested. The FW-190D was not just fast, it was a refinement of everything the Luftwaffe had learned in 5 years of war. The long nose housed a Junkers Jumo 213 inline engine, giving it speed and altitude performance the earlier radial engine variants lacked. At 25,000 feet, it could outrun a Spitfire. At 15,000, it could outturn a Thunderbolt. Its armament was devastating. 2 13mm machine guns in the cowling, 2 20mm cannon in the wing roots. A 3-second burst could shred a Tempest. German pilots who flew it called it the Dora, and they flew it with absolute confidence. They owned the vertical fight. They dictated engagement terms. They killed with impunity. Beamont studied every scrap of intelligence on the aircraft. He reviewed combat reports from Mustang pilots who had engaged Doris at altitude. He examined wreckage recovered from crash sites. He interviewed prisoners of war, asking technical questions about climb rates, fuel consumption, handling characteristics. He built a mental performance envelope. He knew the Dora could sustain a 4.5 G turn without stalling. He knew its roll rate decreased above 400 miles per hour. He knew its dive speed was limited by control stiffening, not structural failure. And he knew that in a traditional dogfight, a Tempest at altitude had no advantages. Every maneuver doctrine taught climbing spirals, energy retention, coordinated attacks played to the Dora's strengths. The Tempest's advantages were different. It was heavier, which meant it accelerated faster in a dive. Its controls remained effective at higher speeds. Its structural strength was exceptional, designed originally for low-level ground attack where sudden maneuvers and heavy G-loads were common. Beamont began to see a solution forming, not in climbing fights or turning battles, but in descending ones. Gravity was the ultimate energy source. If a Tempest could convert altitude to speed faster than a Dora could follow, if it could endure G-forces that would incapacitate a German pilot, if it could execute a maneuver so violent that pursuit was impossible, then survival became possible. The maneuver he envisioned was simple in concept, suicidal in execution. Roll inverted, pull the stick forward. Enter a -G vertical dive. The aircraft would accelerate beyond anything the enemy could match. The -G forces would be brutal, potentially fatal, but brief. Pull out at minimum altitude where the Tempest's low-level speed advantage would allow escape. He sketched it repeatedly. He calculated G-loads, structural margins, speed buildups. He knew the human body could tolerate -G for short durations. Blood would rush to the head, vision would redden, consciousness would narrow. But if the dive lasted less than 10 seconds, survival was possible. The aircraft would endure. The Tempest's wing spars were rated for 12G positive, 8G negative. A vertical dive at full throttle would impose perhaps 6G negative at the pullout. Risky, but within limits. The problem was not physics, it was doctrine. Every manual, every instructor, every combat veteran said the same thing. Never push forward on the stick in combat. Negative G was disorienting, dangerous, uncontrollable. Pilots who tried it died. Beamont believed they died because they did it wrong, because they panicked, because they did not calculate. He believed it could work. He simply had no way to prove it without risking his life. Beamont kept his theory private for 3 months. He refined it in silence, filling pages with calculations, sketching dive profiles from different altitudes, estimating recovery times and minimum pull-out heights. The mathematics were elegant. The execution would be anything but. A negative G vertical dive violated not just doctrine, but human physiology. Positive G forces pushed blood toward the feet. Pilots trained for it, wore G suits, learned to grunt and tense muscles to maintain consciousness. Negative G did the opposite. It pushed blood toward the brain. The eyes would engorge, vision would flood red, the heart would struggle against reversed pressure gradients. Disorientation was guaranteed. Spatial awareness would collapse. Instruments would be unreadable through blood-filled eyes. And the body's instinct would scream to stop, to pull back, to escape the unnatural forces tearing at every cell. But Beamont believed the fear was worse than the reality. Yes, negative G was brutal. Yes, it would be disorienting. But it would also be brief. A vertical dive from 15,000 feet at full throttle would reach terminal velocity in approximately 8 seconds. The pullout would impose maximum negative G for perhaps 3 seconds. 11 seconds of hell in exchange for survival. He had endured worse in test flights, had pushed experimental aircraft through high-speed dives, had felt controls go mushy and airframes shudder. He knew the sensation of an aircraft on the edge. He trusted his ability to read it, to sense, when metal was screaming but holding, when physics was angry but contained. The Tempest could take it. The question was whether he could. In late December 1944, Beamont finally mentioned the idea to squadron leader McConnell. They were in the dispersal hut, nursing mugs of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Beamont sketched the dive profile on the back of a weather report. McConnell listened, his face hardening with each sentence. When Beamont finished, McConnell tore the paper in half. He told Beamont the idea was lunacy, that negative G dives killed pilots, that even if the aircraft survived, the pilot would black out, lose control, and auger into the ground. That doctrine existed for a reason, that men who ignored it died, and worse, got their wingmen killed. He ordered Beamont to forget it, to focus on proven tactics, to stop treating combat like a university physics problem. Beamont said nothing. He saluted. He left. But he did not forget. He could not. The logic was too sound, the physics too clear. He knew McConnell's objections were based on anecdote, not analysis. Yes, pilots had died attempting negative G maneuvers, but they had done so in panic, without calculation, without understanding structural limits or physiological tolerances. They had pushed forward on the stick because they were desperate, not because they had planned. Beamont would be different. He would know exactly when to initiate, exactly how long to sustain, exactly when to recover. He would turn a death spiral into a calculated escape. He would prove that what everyone called impossible was simply untested. He returned to his notebooks. He refined the numbers. He visualized the execution in minute detail. And he waited for the mission that would force his hand. For the moment when doctrine would fail him, when the enemy would have every advantage, when the choice would be simple. Die following the rules, or survive by breaking them. January 12, 1945. Dawn comes cold and gray over the Belgian airfield. Frost coats the Tempests lined along the dispersal area. Ground crews move in darkness, their breath visible in the pre-dawn chill. Engines cough to life one by one, blue flames spitting from exhaust stubs. The smell of high-octane fuel and oil hangs heavy in the air. Beamont walks the perimeter of his aircraft, checking control surfaces, running his hand along the leading edge of the wing. Ice has formed overnight. A crew chief scrapes it away with a wooden paddle. The mission brief was short. Fighter sweep over the Rhine. Escort a photo reconnaissance Mosquito to Cologne. Expect heavy enemy activity. Return. No one mentioned the obvious, that every mission over the Rhine in January was a death lottery, that the Luftwaffe was husbanding fuel for exactly these high-value targets. Beamont climbs into the cockpit. The leather seat is frozen. The instrument panel reflects dull light from the eastern horizon. He runs through the checklist. Mechanically, fuel full, guns armed, radio functional, oxygen flowing. He straps in, cinches the harness tight, and waits for the signal. Green flare, engines roar. 4 Tempests taxi in sequence, their propellers kicking up dust and ice crystals. They take off in pairs, climbing into the gray soup of cloud cover. Beamont is flying as number 3, wingman to Flight Lieutenant Marks. Number 4 is a replacement pilot, 18 years old, on his second operational sortie. His name is Davies. Beamont has spoken to him once. The formation climbs through 8,000 feet. The clouds break. Sunlight floods the cockpit, blinding after the gray twilight below. They level at 15,000 feet, heading east toward the Rhine. The reconnaissance Mosquito is already over target when they arrive. Beamont can see it, a tiny speck weaving through flak bursts over Cologne. Black puffs of 88mm fire blossom around it like deadly flowers. The Tempest flight positions itself high and south, scanning for threats. Radio chatter is sparse. Marks calls out headings. Davies confirms visual contact. Beamont's eyes sweep the sky. High contrails, distant formations, nothing immediate. Then the call comes. Bandits, high 4 o'clock 7+. Beamont looks up and back. They are there, black dots against blue sky, descending in a lazy spiral. FW-190Ds, 7 aircraft. His heart rate does not increase. His breathing stays steady. He notes their altitude, 22,000 feet. Their formation, loose echelon. Their approach vector, aggressive. Marks calls the break. The Tempest scatter. Beamont breaks right, climbing, trying to gain separation. Davies follows him initially, then panics and dives. One of the Doras peels off to chase him. Beamont loses visual. Marks is somewhere to the left, engaged with at least 2 Germans. The radio erupts with shouts. Beamont is alone. He counts the remaining Doras. 4 are repositioning above him. 3 are diving directly toward him. He has perhaps 20 seconds before they open fire. He tries to climb. The Tempest claws for altitude, but the Doras are faster. They close the gap. Cannon fire flickers from their wings. Tracers arc past Beamont's canopy. He breaks left. More fire. A shell punches through his wing root. Alarm scream. He is out of altitude, out of options, out of time. The moment has arrived. Die by doctrine, or prove the theory. Beamont's hand moves to the stick. Beamont rolls inverted. The world flips. Sky below, earth above. His body weight presses against the harness straps. Loose objects in the cockpit, maps, pencils, float upward, defying gravity. He pushes the stick forward. The nose drops, not gently, violently. The Tempest pitches into a vertical dive, inverted, accelerating toward the Earth 5 miles below. The negative G forces hit immediately. Blood rushes to his head. His face swells. Oh! His eyes feel like they are bulging from their sockets. Vision floods red. The instrument panel blurs. He tastes copper. His inner ear screams that he is falling, tumbling, dying. Every instinct demands he pull back, recover, escape this unnatural attitude. He ignores it. He has calculated this. 8 seconds to terminal velocity. 3 seconds of maximum negative G at pullout. 11 seconds total. He can endure 11 seconds. The altimeter unwinds like a broken clock. 14,000 feet, 13,000, 12,000. The airspeed indicator climbs past 300 miles per hour, 320, 340. The controls stiffen. The stick vibrates in his hand. The engine roars at full throttle, the propeller screaming as it bites thin air. Outside the canopy, the Rhine rushes upward, a silver ribbon growing wider, more detailed. He can see bridges, roads, individual buildings. His vision is almost completely red now. He cannot read the instruments. He is flying by sensation, by the pressure in his skull, by the vibration in the stick. The negative G is crushing. He feels like his brain is pushing against the inside of his forehead. His teeth ache, his sinuses scream. He wants to vomit, but cannot. The forces are too extreme. Above and behind him, the FW-190Ds attempt to follow. The lead pilot rolls inverted, pushes forward, enters his own dive. But he is not prepared. He has not calculated. The negative G hits him like a hammer. His vision goes black-red. He loses spatial orientation. He pulls back instinctively, recovering to level flight. Aborting the pursuit, the second Dora pilot tries. He makes it 3 seconds before his body betrays him. Blood vessels burst in his eyes. He cannot see. He rolls upright, gasping into his oxygen mask, and breaks off. The third does not even attempt it. He watches the Tempest fall, a dark shape plummeting vertically, impossibly, and decides the kill is not worth dying for. They climb away, reforming, reporting over the radio that the Tempest has gone into an uncontrolled dive. They claim it destroyed. They are wrong. At 4,000 feet, Beamont begins the pullout. He does not pull back on the stick. He cannot. His arms are leaden, heavy with blood, barely functional. Instead, he uses trim. His left hand, shaking, reaches for the trim wheel. He rolls it back. The nose begins to rise, slowly. The negative G lessens. His vision clears slightly. He can see the altimeter again, 3,000 feet. He rolls the trim further. The nose comes up, 2,000 feet. The positive G begins now, building as the Tempest arcs from vertical to horizontal, 4G, 5G, 6G. His vision tunnels. Blood drains from his head. He grunts, tensing his legs and abdomen, fighting to stay conscious. The horizon appears, level. He rolls upright, 1,000 feet above the Rhine, airspeed 410 miles per hour, alive. Beamont flies west at treetop level. His hands shake on the stick. His vision clears slowly, red fading to pink, then normal. His head pounds. He can feel his pulse in his temples, behind his eyes, and his neck. He checks the engine gauges. Oil pressure normal, temperature rising but within limits. He glances back. The sky behind him is empty. No pursuit. The Doras are gone, either convinced he crashed or unwilling to descend into the flak-filled valleys where Allied anti-aircraft units prowled. He is alone. He tries the radio. Static. Something is damaged. He continues west, following the Rhine downstream, navigating by landmarks. His fuel is low. The dive burned through reserves at an alarming rate. He has perhaps 20 minutes of flight time remaining. The Belgian airfield appears through haze. He enters the circuit without radio clearance, waggling his wings to signal distress. The tower fires a green flare. He is cleared to land. The approach is shaky. His hands will not stop trembling. He touches down hard, bounces once, settles. The Tempest rolls to a stop near the dispersal area. Ground crews sprint toward him. They expect to find a shot-up aircraft, perhaps a wounded pilot. What they find is something stranger. Beamont sits motionless in the cockpit, staring straight ahead. His face is flushed deep red. Burst blood vessels spiderweb across his cheeks and forehead. His eyes are bloodshot, the whites almost entirely crimson. He looks like he has been beaten. Flight Sergeant Hutchins climbs onto the wing, opens the canopy, and recoils at the smell. Vomit, blood, sweat. Beamont turns his head slowly and says 3 words, "Check the airframe." The inspection takes 2 hours. Hutchins and his crew go over every inch of the Tempest. They find stress cracks in the wing root where cannon shells penetrated. They find buckling in the fuselage stringers aft of the cockpit. They find rivets that have popped along the dorsal spine. But the main spars are intact. The control cables are functional. The skin is dimpled but not torn. The aircraft is damaged but flyable. Hutchins writes his report in careful block letters. Overstressed. Requires major inspection before next flight. Structurally sound. He hands it to Beamont, who is sitting on an ammunition crate, drinking water, still shaking. Hutchins asks what happened. Beamont tells him. Hutchins does not believe him. No one survives a vertical inverted dive. Beamont says nothing. He simply points to the gun camera mounted in the wing. The film is developed that evening. Intelligence officers thread it into a projector in the briefing room. Squadron leader McConnell is present. Group Captain Evans, the wing commander, has been summoned. They watch in silence. The footage is grainy, black and white, but clear enough. It shows the sky inverting. It shows the nose dropping. It shows the altimeter spinning backward through the frame edge. It shows the Rhine growing larger, impossibly large. It shows the pullout, the horizon rotating back into place, the aircraft leveling at an altitude so low that trees fill the bottom of the frame. It shows survival, where there should be death. McConnell stares at the screen. Evans asks to see it again. They watch it 3 more times. No one speaks. Finally, Evans asks Beamont how he knew it would work. Beamont opens his notebook, shows the calculations, explains the physics. Evans listens. When Beamont finishes, Evans closes the notebook and hands it back. He tells Beamont he is grounded pending medical clearance. He also tells him to write a full tactical report. Doctrine may need revision. Medical Officer Captain Reynolds examines Beamont the next morning. The burst blood vessels in his eyes and face are spectacular. Reynolds documents them with photographs, noting the pattern of petechial hemorrhaging consistent with extreme negative G exposure. He measures Beamont's blood pressure, elevated but stable. He checks his vision, blurred in the left eye, but improving. He asks about headaches, severe, about nausea, constant, about disorientation, intermittent. Reynolds writes a recommendation. Grounded for 1 week minimum, no high G maneuvers for 2 weeks. Follow-up examination required before return to combat status. He tells Beamont he is lucky to be alive. Beamont says luck had nothing to do with it. Reynolds does not argue. He has seen too many pilots die to believe in luck. He has also never seen one survive what the gun camera footage showed. Beamont writes his tactical report in the quiet of the officers' mess. He describes the engagement, the geometry of the attack, the decision matrix that led to the dive. He includes performance data, G-load estimates, physiological effects, structural observations. He does not embellish. He does not claim heroism. He presents it as a test flight report, clinical and factual. He concludes with a recommendation. The maneuver is viable as a last resort escape tactic for pilots with no altitude advantage and no possibility of outrunning superior enemy fighters. It requires specific conditions. Minimum altitude of 10,000 feet to allow for pullout, aircraft structural integrity, pilot physiological tolerance, and most critically, precise execution. Errors are fatal. He submits the report to McConnell, who forwards it to Evans, who forwards it to Fighter Command. 3 days later, the reply comes back. Authorized for experimental training under controlled conditions. Flight Lieutenant Marks volunteers to attempt it first. He is a veteran, 24 years old with 19 kills, and a reputation for precision flying. Beamont briefs him personally, walking through every phase, every sensation, every decision point. Marks listens, asks technical questions, and agrees to try. They fly together, Beamont as observer, in a second Tempest. At 12,000 feet, Marks rolls inverted and pushes forward. His dive is textbook. He holds it for 6 seconds, pulls out at 3,000 feet, levels off. He lands pale and shaking, but unhurt. He tells Beamont the negative G was worse than he imagined, that his vision went completely red, that he nearly panicked. But he also tells him it worked. that the physics were exactly as Beamont predicted, that he would use it if his life depended on it. 2 other pilots attempt it. 1 succeeds. The other, Pilot Officer Graham, pulls out too late and crashes into a forest north of the field. He is killed instantly. The experimental program is suspended pending investigation. The war in Europe ended 4 months later. By May 1945, the Luftwaffe was destroyed, its airfields overrun, its pilots dead or captured. The FW-190D, once the terror of the Western Front, became scrap metal in Allied salvage yards. The Tempest squadrons stood down, their pilots rotating home or transferring to occupation duties. Beamont survived. He flew 63 combat missions, claimed 12 confirmed kills, and was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. His citation made no mention of the inverted dive. Officially, it did not exist. The experimental training program was quietly shelved after Graham's death. Fighter Command deemed the maneuver too dangerous for widespread adoption. The risk outweighed the tactical benefit. Doctrine remained unchanged. Pilots were instructed to maintain altitude, avoid negative G maneuvers, and rely on teamwork and firepower. But unofficially, the knowledge spread. Marks told other pilots, they told others. The story of the Tempest that escaped 7 Doris over the Rhine became legend in the squadron bars and dispersal huts. Details were exaggerated, physics simplified, but the core remained. One pilot had done the impossible and survived. Some dismissed it as myth, others quietly filed it away, a forbidden technique to be used only when death was certain. Beamont himself said little. He returned to test flying after the war, joining Hawker Aircraft as chief test pilot. He flew the first British jet fighters, pushed them through high-speed dives, tested their limits. He never attempted the inverted dive again. He did not need to. He had proven his point. Decades later, in the early 1960s, an aerospace engineer studying high-performance maneuvers rediscovered Beamont's tactical report, buried in Fighter Command archives. They analyzed it with modern computational tools, modeling the forces, the trajectories, the physiological impacts. Their conclusion matched his calculations exactly. The maneuver was viable, dangerous, extreme, but viable. The physics were sound. The U.S. Air Force incorporated variations into jet fighter training as negative G evasion techniques. Soviet pilots developed similar tactics independently. The maneuver evolved, adapted to faster aircraft and different enemies, but the principle remained Beamont's. Use gravity as a weapon, accept brief physiological punishment to achieve geometric advantage, survive through calculation rather than instinct. Beamont died in 2015 at the age of 94. His obituary mentioned his test pilot career, his wartime service, his contributions to British aviation. It did not mention the dive. Most who read it did not know what he had done over the Rhine in January 1945. But in flight schools, instructors still teach energy management. They still discuss negative G tolerance. They still emphasize that survival sometimes requires doing what doctrine forbids. The language has changed. The aircraft have changed. The principle has not. One pilot, one calculation, one moment of defying every rule proved that disadvantage is not destiny, that physics and courage combined can rewrite the geometry of combat. Beamont's name faded. His idea endures.